What's up, my guys? What's up, my girls? Welcome back to the Dani Flo Podcast. I'm your boy, Dani Flo. I'm a 28-year-old Catholic husband and father. This is the podcast where I talk about my philosophy of life. I don't try to answer the question, what is life? I just share what brings meaning and purpose and value to my life, what makes my life significant. And in hopes of sharing, I hope that you also may find some of those things significant. So one of those things for me is philosophy. I study philosophy part-time, and I've met some really good people along the way. I've been studying philosophy since 2016. I think about a year ago, I met my friend who's joining me today. His name is Bill. And within the first few days of the class that we shared, we got into an interesting conversation about pragmatism. So he's here joining me today to have a discussion about it. Bill, welcome. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks. That's good to be here. So I am a Christian education person. I'm going for my doctorate of ministry, and my project for that is partially about pragmatism and how pragmatism has affected the church and how the church educates. So that's like my main academic area of interest right now. So I kind of have like this dual thing of studying pragmatism and seeing that's where that's taking us, and then also trying, like, that's half of it and the other half is trying to correct that. So but I've had an interest in philosophy for the past like 7 years or so. And before that, I was a Bible theology major. I went to seminary, got my master's degree. And so I was more interested in like biblical studies and theology and church history. And I feel like I've got a pretty good grasp of that stuff. And lately I've been interested in philosophy. And that's kind of been a main lens that I view everything through now. I mean, not that I don't see things theologically and stuff like that, but it's just kind of added another way that I like see the world. So,
So you've been interested in philosophy the last 7 years. Before we get into what pragmatism means, so you've been in philosophy the last 7 years. What made you interested in pragmatism in the first place? When were you first introduced to that concept?
So after I graduated from seminary, I decided to go for my PhD in Christian education. And for like a million reasons, I decided to not pursue that anymore. But when I was in that program, they were discussing basically, for the most part, pragmatism, philosophy in general. And they kind of presented us with this problem that, there's this philosophy, this secular philosophy, among others, called pragmatism, that's like really affecting how we do things, and it's not good. And at the time, I didn't really care. When I went for my PhD, I didn't necessarily go because I wanted to be a professor, because it's super hard to get a job. You might apply for a job and there's like 150 other PhDs that apply, So I wasn't going there for that. I was going there mostly so I could get better at being a Christian education person in a church. And at the time, I didn't think that what I was learning there was going to help me become better at that. And so that was one of the main reasons I left. After I left, I realized that was stupid. And I didn't realize how important philosophy was until I left. And it didn't take me that long after I left to figure it out. But so yeah, that's where it all started. And
okay, so if I could summarize, you were in a program, and they presented this problem, and at the time you didn't really care because you were taking this program to help you become a better Christian educator. Is that fair?
Yeah, like I was more interested in learning about specific practices, like how to be a better teacher, or how to run an education program better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not really what the PhD program is.
Okay.
And so I was like, this is not really what I want to do. And so I left, which is kind of pragmatic of me.
So
Looking back at it, but
this problem of pragmatism was presented. You left the PhD program for a million reasons, like you said, and when this problem was presented, you didn't really care about it.
mhm.
So, and then after you left, you realized that philosophy was actually important. But how long after you left the PhD program did you kind of focus in on the problem of pragmatism?
Well, I noticed it almost right away.
Hmm.
So when I moved to Illinois,
Hmm.
I moved here because my pastor from where I used to live had moved to Illinois, and he was working at a church in the same city that my best friend lived in, and I was going to work for him. So I was like, I moved there, I had a job, and I had like immediate opportunity to like volunteer in a church and do, you know, education stuff at the church. And so when I should preface this by just quickly saying that education philosophies have like roles for the teacher. Like if you're a pragmatic educator, then this is what the teacher should do. If you're X, Y, or Z philosophy, then this is what the teacher should do. And so in pragmatism, the teacher is considered a facilitator. Okay.
Hmm.
And so the very first week I moved to Illinois, I went to church, and I just picked a random Bible study into it, and the teacher, who's a really good friend of mine now, introduced himself. It was the first week of the class. It wasn't just the first week I was there, but and he said, my name is, I won't say his name publicly,
Hmm.
but he said, I'm the facilitator of this class. And I was like, I just kind of put my head down and had to suppress laughing because, I knew what that meant philosophically from what
Hmm.
I had just learned. And so then I really started to see like, wow, this is going on everywhere, and it's such a problem.
Hmm.
And so because that's what I want to do, and because I really, it kind of like that opened the floodgates, and then I just started really looking around everywhere what was going on. And I think it's happening more up north than it, because the PhD program I was in was down in Texas. So, they're more conservative down there and do things differently than most people up north. So it's way more prevalent up here, I think. But so yeah, that kind of opened my eyes, and ever since then I just kind of think about it all the
Hmm.
time. And so then I decided to go back for my Doctor of Ministry degree, which
Hmm.
is that's more of a practical thing. Kind of the methods type of stuff. But I'm doing my project on writing a Christian philosophy of education, rather than, and also at the same time criticizing how pragmatism, like presenting how pragmatism is affecting us and criticizing it, and then presenting like, this is my better, in my opinion, option.
Hmm.
Um,
I'm going to ask you a hypothetical question because I find that interesting. So you left the PhD program, and even though at the time you didn't care about the pragmatism problem that had been presented, you moved to Illinois. You chose a church at chance. You attended their Bible study, but because of what you learned in the PhD program, you kind of were able to, for lack of better terminology, sense that the person leading this Bible study, instead of maybe sharing or teaching what they know, because they use the word facilitator, from what you had learned, you realized this is a pragmatic teacher. Is that the proper way to say it? Pragmatic teacher, pragmatism teacher.
yeah, I think that the way that set up and the way that curriculum is set up,
Hmm.
it lends itself to that pragmatic approach. It's not like he said, I'm a pragmatist and I'm going
Hmm.
to do this. because I'm a pragmatist. Like he's not an educator by trade. He's a volunteer at the church, super smart guy, loves the Bible, loves teaching and stuff like that. So he didn't intentionally go in doing that, right? But
Right.
so pragmatism is an American thing, and it's just kind of something that we all are and do almost naturally. But yeah, it's probably I would say it's the curriculum is written for the teacher to be a facilitator.
So my hypothetical question is, like, do you think if it hadn't, like, let's say that Bible study had gone completely different, do you think you would have focused in as much as you have on this problem of pragmatism? Do you think eventually it would have made its way to your front door, so to speak?
Maybe. But yeah, I mean, I think it would have happened no matter where I went, right? I think that's probably the best answer. No matter where I went, it could have been any church, basically anywhere, and I would have ran into the same issue. So.
All right, so you kind of already started, I think, to give us, for those of us that are kind of obsessed with definitions and knowing something philosophically. I am that way. I like to know what a thing is. For some reason, I want to know all the isms, and then I want to decide for myself, do I agree with this ism? Do I not agree with this ism? Why do I agree with it? Why do I not agree with it? So you already started, but in my opinion, you already started because you said pragmatism is an American thing. So what is pragmatism? Let's start there, and then as we get going, maybe we can start unpacking why it's a problem.
Yeah, so pragmatism is an American thing because it was essentially Americans that invented it. So the big names are Charles Peirce and William James and John Dewey. John Dewey was older, and he was kind of I'm sorry, William James was like kind of before Dewey. He was like a generation before, but they interlap. They overlap with each other. So like James will talk about Dewey, and Dewey will talk about James. But so that's the reason it's American. And then so kind of the climate that pragmatism developed in was Darwinism was hot and fresh and the kind of the cool new kid in town, and also people were becoming more and more skeptical of religion, and people were becoming more and more skeptical of science in general. And that's mostly because science was the way I'm interpreting it is science was changing so rapidly because they were learning so much and like changing theories all the time based on new information, that they were really skeptical. Like, what are we going to learn from this? Like, they're saying something new all the time, So, and then there's this clash between science and religion, that's really at the forefront now because of Darwin. And so what specifically William James is trying to do, not so much Dewey. Dewey was much more of an atheist than James. At least that's my impression. So James is trying to find a way for science and religion to work together. How can we develop a philosophy that paves the way for both to be of value? Which sounds great, right? Like that sounds like a good idea, except for his answer was not that great. So that's kind of that's like the bed that pragmatism started in.
Okay, so sorry for interrupting. So it's considered an American teaching philosophy by virtue of the fact that it was American philosophers that kind of came up with it, that kind of wrote about it, thought about it, wrote about it, documented it. And the reason that they did this is because they were living in a time where Darwinism was gaining popularity, and maybe because of Darwinism, religion was being put under scrutiny. People were becoming skeptical of religion, but at the same time, because at the moment science was changing so fast, they were also skeptical of that, because since it was changing so fast, they weren't really confident that they could learn anything. You know, by the time they learned it, it was changing again. And then so American philosophers like William James and Dewey tried to, I guess, fix it by coming up with this teaching philosophy. And specifically with William James, he was kind of trying to bridge the tension between religion and science.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That sound like a good history of the pragmatism origin?
That's a good summary, except that it's not just a specific teaching philosophy.
Okay.
It's like a everything philosophy, and
it's just an ideology among many.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so with any philosophy, you can build anything on its foundation. So education, put it, science, psychology, religion, you can put a million things on the foundation of pragmatism. So.
Okay, so what flashback to when we first had this conversation and when we were getting to know each other, the way that you explained pragmatism to me at the time was that pragmatism was basically what works. Mm-hmm. Whatever works, that's the answer. And like you said, it didn't start in the church, in Christianity, but it's made its way from where it started into Christianity to where now the way that Christians teach doctrine and the Bible and stuff like that is they just whatever works. Mm-hmm. Like teach it as long as the person is, I guess, called the Christian. If that works, then that's what we're gonna do. Mm-hmm. You probably need to tweak that.
Only a little bit. I mean, I don't even have to tweak it. Maybe just add to it. Mm-hmm. So it has worked its way to the church in the sense that it has permeated the entire culture. Mm-hmm. So everyone in the United States is a little bit pragmatic, at least a little bit pragmatic. We're also all probably a little bit modern, and we're probably all a little bit postmodern, right? And so
because it's in the Kool-Aid, so to speak.
Yeah, and if we're Christians, hopefully we're a little bit Christian.
Yeah, hopefully. My goodness.
Yeah, so let's talk about pragmatism. Well, let's first finish talking about the evolution side of the metaphysics. Okay. So basically, because evolution was super cool at the time, and science was deemed by them to not be able to give absolute truth or objective truth, they applied evolution to everything metaphysically. So everything is, it's not that we can discover new information and come up with a better theory. It's that truth changes, not just, so evolution is not just about like biology. Everything evolves, right? So so that's the metaphysics. Basically, everything is evolution. That's the way I'm understanding it. So then we move into epistemology, and so what becomes true is what enables us to essentially live and thrive in a changing environment. And so the way you do that is, the way you discover truth is by experiencing things and finding out what works, right? AKA what is best for me. If you're an early pragmatist like William James is more individualistic, and John Dewey is he's more of a group thinker. Like he was big on democracy. And so he's more interested in what works for the group, what works for you know, the country, your business, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the emphasis became, like you said, on what works, and also, so they use two different ways of talking about it: what works and what is useful, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they would say, especially William James would say, if I believe A, and I take that and I like kind of live with A and walk around with A, if there's no difference between living with A and walking around with A as there would be with B, belief B, if there's no difference between the two, then it doesn't matter,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like both are true. If you believe A and it works for you, and I believe B and it works for me, then they're both equally true. So he would have, like, you're a Catholic and I'm a Protestant.
Mm-hmm.
A pragmatist would say, that's fine. It works for you and it works for me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's no truth, there's no actual truth out there to be had on the
Mm-hmm.
topic.
And the reason that there's no truth to be had on the topic is because a truth outside of us, a truth that's real outside of us, whether I have it or you have it or none of us have it or both have it, doesn't actually exist because
everything's always changing.
Okay. That makes sense to me. I hope it makes sense to
and so here's a really good example of this from our current social world. So Jordan Peterson is a William James pragmatist, right?
Okay.
And so if you were to listen to a lot of his videos, I need to find the one where he talks about it. I probably never will because he's made so many videos. But he basically, if I could summarize Jordan Peterson, and I hope I can do it fairly, is he doesn't actually think that Christianity is true, but he lives as if it is because he thinks it's better to live your life that way than to not live your life that way, right?
I think that's pretty fair. I've heard him say
think it's true. Now he might think it's true now because the last video he made after he came out of the hospital, he like basically was saying like, "Thank God." So I don't know. He may have changed his mind.
Yeah,
but
we can hope and we can pray.
Yeah, he's a self-avowed. He describes himself as a William James pragmatist. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I have heard him. Say, I watched a video on YouTube or elsewhere where he had a discussion with Sam Harris, and there was a moderator and things like that, and the discussion was around Sam Harris's concerns with the things that Jordan Peterson was saying, and that it was gaining popularity because it kind of had a religious undertone. And of course, Sam Harris is non-religious. And yeah, Jordan Peterson said something like, it's not that I believe in God, it's that I act as if God exists. And so I think that's a good example because he's saying it's got that pragmatism undertone on it. He's saying, well, it may or may not be true, but either way, it works to live your life this way. So as long as it works, then I'm going to keep living my life this way. And he didn't say this, but until maybe I find something else that works better, right? Because it's about what works. It's not about truth metaphysically, and it's not about whether we can know the truth, right? Epistemology. It's about what works. And as long as it works, then that's what I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
So let's kind of marinate in this a little bit. So because you said I find it very interesting that you said all of us, because we're in the United States, all of us are a little bit pragmatist. Off the top of your head, can you give like common examples of areas in which we are pragmatists?
Yeah, so, well, just think of like some common phrases, like whatever floats your boat,
okay,
stuff like that, and we might not all, let's put it this way. There are I would say probably everyone believes something because it's convenient for them to believe that. Right? It works.
Like everyone has that in their arsenal of beliefs.
Yeah, so they might not. There's people that are pragmatists without knowing it, and then there are people like Jordan Peterson that are intentionally pragmatists and they've really thought about it. And then I think, but for a lot of us, we've kind of got a mishmashed epistemology in different areas of life, right? And we don't even know anything about that. We haven't categorized it, or like no one knows that they're a philosopher, even though we're all philosophers. But we've all got this mishmash of philosophy inside of us. And so I would say that some of us in certain areas are pragmatic.
Okay.
So, maybe it's a moral thing. Maybe it's a specific moral thing, that you haven't really dealt with yet, and you're just kind of being pragmatic about it. So there's a difference between like being tolerant. Like if you want to be that way, that's fine. As long as you're not forcing me to be that way. That's not really pragmatic. Like I might have my own opinion that I'm not pushing on you.
When you gave the example of whatever floats your boat, it made me think of I was having a conversation. I don't intentionally try to have philosophical conversations with people. That's just, I don't want to say that that's my nature because I don't know that. I think it's just because I'm interested in philosophy that I tend to get philosophical. But I was having, one of many conversations that all of us have. And the phrase that the guy that I was talking to used, he said, "I'm not going to yuck somebody else's yum." And now that you've kind of explained a little bit deeper to me what pragmatism is, that kind of sounds pragmatist to me. Like, I'm not going to yuck somebody else's yum. Like, that might work for you, and I'm not going to ruin that for you. And like vice versa, like something works for me, so don't ruin that for me. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if you say that and you really think that whatever they think is true too, then you're a pragmatist. Otherwise, you're just kind of like being nice. You're being tolerant.
Yeah, kind of like what you said. Like I might have my own opinion, but I'm not going to push it on you, and vice versa. Kind of like that. Okay, so it's like a subtle difference.
Yeah.
It has more to do with like if they think two like maybe contradictory things can coexist.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example, a more concrete example of like an actual pragmatic thing, a way of thinking. So one time I was in a Sunday school at church, and I was a pretty young guy then, and I wasn't super willing to like stick my neck out in front of a bunch of like older guys that they were all like 20 to 40 years older than me. But so this one guy was there, and we were talking about the sayings of Jesus. I don't remember exactly the curriculum we were using, but so that week we were talking about I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And one of the guys says, I don't buy that. I don't buy that because I know a lot of nice Jews and Muslims. And so that's pragmatist for a lot of reasons. Like, first of all, it's saying that truth is relative or pluralistic. Like, basically, he's saying Jews and Muslims are going to go to heaven too, right? And it's based on his experience of knowing some nice Jews and Muslims, which is pretty spotty, like, logic. But that's his interpretation of his experience. And so as a pragmatist, especially like a William James pragmatist, would say that the individual interprets whatever the individual interprets his experience as, and if that works for him and he's able to fit that into his worldview and function as a human being, then it's true, right? So I mean, and it's pretty amazing to call yourself a Christian and say that Jesus created the universe, but you don't buy what he said about
right, you don't buy what he's saying. Well,
like,
it's
I don't care what you said, even though I think you're God.
all right.
My experience of knowing some nice Jews and Muslims trumps what you say.
So, well, like, to me, I don't think I would be able to say I don't buy that, because to me, everything, like I believe Jesus resurrected, right? So, like, if Jesus resurrected, like, everything he says matters, right? So, like, that is inconsistent in my mind. I wouldn't be able to say, well, yeah, he resurrected, but this one thing that he said, I don't know if I can sign on to that one. So, what you just said about this person that had some anecdotal, I guess, proof for himself that because he knows people that are nice Jews and nice Muslims, therefore, you know, Jesus is not the only way, or whatever. It sounds like it. If I'm understanding correctly, it sounds like pragmatism is filled with like hyper subjectivism, which I do see a lot of. And that might not be true that pragmatism has hypersubjectivism, but when I look at the world around me, at least in the bubble that I live in, because we don't all participate in all of these subcultures that exist in America, but in the bubble that I live in, or the echo chamber that I've kind of chosen or have locked myself in or whatever, I see a lot of hyper subjectivism. Like, it is all about your experience and the anecdotal experiences that you've collected and how you see things, and how it is very individual, like individual perspective. And that is what, the truth is based on your just it's based on you.
It's so pragmatism is definitely really closely related to postmodernism. Because there's basically modernism, pragmatism, and then postmodernism, and there's like links between the three. So there's, like Jordan Peterson hates postmodernism, right? But he's a pragmatist, and he's a modernist, and he's a pragmatist, right? Because he finds value in religion, because if you're just I think if he was just a modernist, he'd be a nihilist, and he doesn't want to be a nihilist. So there's definitely links between, there's some people that are pragmatists and they're realists too, in a sense. Like, and then there's pragmatists that are postmodernists, and they're more about subjective truth. So, so if we were going to be putting pragmatism up on a board in a philosophy class, under the epistemology category, we would write that truth is relative, right? So modernism, it's objective, it's knowable, we're optimistic that we can figure things out. And then pragmatist is skeptical, and it's relative. So what relative truth is, if we're both looking at the same thing, and we see two different things, like we interpret it differently. And a pragmatist would say, however you see it, if it's useful, then it's true, right?
So if it's
not and then
useful,
a postmodernist would say, I don't even acknowledge that thing's existence, right?
Right.
Or I might make, there's something over here that just exists because I claim that it does. So relative is we're both looking at the same thing, and we come to different conclusions based on our philosophy. It's kind of hard to explain. I'm not doing a very good job.
I think I understand. So yeah, pragmatism is you're both looking at the same thing and you interpret it different. And pragmatism would be if both of you are interpreting it different, but it's useful for both of you, then it's true, it's fine, use it, right?
Yeah.
So So when something is not useful, that's when a pragmatist would say, put that aside.
Yeah, that's not true, and it's not of value axiologically, right?
Okay. What is a value axiology? What is that?
So axiology is the philosophical category of what is asking questions of what's of value.
Okay.
So if something's not useful in pragmatism, it's not of value.
It's not a value, and it's not. So two things can be true, even if they contradict, as long as they're useful.
Yeah.
But if they're not useful, then it's not true, and it's not a value.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So let me give you a quick example. So I'm assuming you've seen The Little Mermaid.
It's been a while, but I have seen it.
Okay. Well, so in Little Mermaid, Ariel is always finding things from the human civilization up there,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the things she finds is a fork.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember what she calls the fork. She doesn't call it a fork. I can't remember if it's a snarfblat or something like that. One of the things in the movie is a snarfblat. I can't remember if that's it, but I should probably look it up. Hold on.
A snarfblat. We should just start using that word.
Oh, it's a dinglehopper. Okay.
So the fork is a dinglehopper.
Yeah. So she calls it a dinglehopper. Okay.
Okay.
So she uses the fork as a comb. She combs her hair with the fork, right?
Right.
So a pragmatist would say it's totally cool that she uses it, as a fork, whatever. Like, it's a fork. It's all right. It's totally cool. She uses it as a comb. Doesn't matter, right? If it works for her, that's totally fine. And so, but if you move that to like the realm of theology, like, okay, here's the thing: a fork doesn't matter, right? It's of no significance, right? I mean, we can have a philosophical debate about the fork.
You want to?
But I can say what I think, but like, even if we were to just kind of have this laissez-faire attitude, like, if you want to use it as a comb, fine, right? But because it's not important, right? We believe that Christianity and theology and that stuff, that matters, right? And so no, it's not a freaking comb.
Yeah, it's not a, what was it called? Dinglehopper?
Yeah.
It's not a dinglehopper, and it's not a comb.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't want to steer us from the direction that we're going, but because you kind of had this example of the guy that was unhappy with Jesus saying he was the way, the truth, and the life, we've kind of, I guess, opened up the door for pragmatism in Christianity. And you just mentioned that for us, right, that a dinglehopper fork doesn't matter. So sure, if we're kind of, I guess, reluctant about things, in that don't matter, like forks, that would be like, yeah, whatever, use it as a comb. But when it comes to Christianity and whether Christianity is true or not, that matters. And so to us, pragmatism in relation to Christianity, I can see why that would be a problem. Do you want to maybe shift to that?
Sure, yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so how did pragmatism just make its way into the church or Christianity, and is it just a problem in America because it was American philosophers who came up with pragmatism, or is this kind of like a global thing?
I mean, it's definitely spread. I have no idea to what extent. I wouldn't be surprised if it's like made its way into like South Korea, because South Korea has been like heavily Christianized. So especially by like Southern Baptists. So as to how much it's spread throughout the world, I can't say. So not my area of expertise. But as far as how did it get into the church?
Yes.
I think it's more of the fact that it just permeated the whole culture, and everybody grew up with pragmatism. We went to schools that used pragmatic methods, and so that's just the culture. And we don't live in a bubble. And church and Christianity, and if your parents raised you as a Christian, whatever, you went to youth group, whatever, it's not your only influence. And so if you're not thinking critically, and you're just not, when you're growing up and you're forming as a human being, like, you're just being influenced by everything. You're not like having analytical thoughts or discussions in your head or with other people about how should I think about the world. You do that later, unfortunately. So that's the base answer of how it got into the church in general.
Yeah, I find that fascinating that would it be fair to say that it gained popularity, and once it gained popularity, it just spread into everything: school, work, religion, everyday conversation. I mean, the internet. Pragmatism just ended up touching everything. Is that kind of what you're saying? It's part of the culture, as in, like, it made its way, and maybe we realize it's made its way into the culture or not.
Yeah.
But now that it's there, we definitely use it.
Yeah. And it's very conducive to like a lot of like American values, which is why it developed here. And also, it developed like during the Industrial Revolution, where we were interested in getting things done. Like, we got to get things done. So just do it. Like, whatever works. You know what I mean? So like pragmatism extends to everything. So I can be pragmatic at work. Like, I'm just going to do whatever I got to do to get this done. Like, I don't care if it's efficient or not. I'm just going to get it done because the customer wants it right now. And so, like, sometimes we have to just do whatever it takes to get it done. And I don't necessarily think that's officially pragmatism, because I can acknowledge that I'm not doing this the best way. But it's in our culture. We are a culture of people that get things done. And also we're
still to this day.
I mean, not as much as we were, probably.
Oh, okay.
I don't think our work ethic is what it used to be, but and then also it really goes along with just kind of like liberalism, in the sense that, like, if you want to believe that, that's fine, as long as you don't force me to believe it. So pragmatism goes along well with that, even though you don't have to be a pragmatist to say you have the freedom to believe whatever you want.
Okay.
Just don't make me believe it.
All right, so it made its way into the culture, and just because obviously, I mean, culture is what society values collectively, right? We all have our personal values, but then we don't live alone, right? We live within a family, and then our families make up society, and so culture is what society at large tends to value. And then Christianity is also part of the culture, so it's just commingling in there. So do you think that, well, obviously in this PhD program that you were taking, they recognized that it had made it into Christianity, and they deemed it as a problem. Would you say that, I guess, is it a lot or a little of the Christian educators that kind of have recognized this, but do some of them not see it as a problem? Do some of them say, well, as long as people are coming to church, as long as people
that's pragmatic.
Right. So as long as people, Bill and Dani, they both identify as a Christian. As long as they both identify as a Christian, then let them keep doing what they're doing, because it's working. So is there people in Christianity that have identified, yes, pragmatism has made it in Christianity, and it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing, let's let's just keep it going.
Hmm.
What do you think?
So we're talking more like from a leadership perspective, like leaders of the church, pretty much. Well, let's just go with that route.
Yeah, let's go that route.
Okay, so I think there's two main types of leaders in the church right now, and so the first group, there's not very many of them, and they are philosophically aware. Like you are philosophically aware, and I'm philosophically aware. That's not a whole lot of people that are philosophically aware in general, right? I think that there's people that have PhDs and that are professors that are teaching whatever subject they're teaching. They have a philosophical perspective that they're teaching from, and they don't even know it, right? Because they have like a gap in their education or something like that. So there's a lot of educated people that are philosophically unaware, in my opinion. But But group one is people that are philosophically aware, and what they would say is either that, yes, it's a problem, or I don't agree with pragmatism, but I'm going to use its methods because I think its methods are good. Okay? So, I might not agree with James or John Dewey about metaphysics or morality or epistemology, but I think his teaching methods are really good, and I'm going to use them. So there's that group of people, and then they're teaching the people that end up going and working in the churches, right? But they're, for the most part, not teaching them that base philosophy stuff, right? They aren't building the foundation. They're building the house on top of it and decorating the house and stuff like that, but they're unaware of the foundation underneath, right? And so they go to church, and then they just use these methods because that's what they've been taught, and they haven't thought deeply about them. So that's group two. That's the philosophically unaware people. And there's way more of those. Almost infinitely way more of those people that are philosophically unaware.
And I'm sorry, I think I might have missed that. Are they philosophically unaware because they were just taught to use pragmatism?
Yeah, without learning about the actual philosophy. So they learned about the methods, but not the philosophy undergirding it. Right?
And so they can't, because they didn't learn the philosophy under the method, they can't decide for themselves, yes, this is a good method. No, this isn't a good method. This is just the method I was taught, and this is the method that I'm using.
That's exactly correct.
Okay.
And so this is my stance. I just read a book today, like it was by two like titans of the Christian education community, and they basically said, I don't really like Dewey, but his methods are good. And for me, my basic response to that is, no matter what philosophy it is, you can apply this to any philosophy, but we'll apply it to pragmatism. If you use pragmatic methods, you will get pragmatic results. So if my teaching methods are based on a theory that truth is relative and that my experience is what is the sole determiner of truth, like, because of course we learn by our experience, right? But that's just one way we learn. Like, our experience needs to be interpreted. But for a pragmatist, it's all about the experience and deciding what works from that experience. So if that's the method I'm going to use, then I'm going to produce people that have that epistemology. I'm going to produce people like that guy in church that says, I don't buy that. I don't believe what Jesus said because of my experience. So when you're just going to produce pragmatists if you use pragmatic methods. If I use postmodern methods, I'm going to produce postmodern people. So,
and the people that are being taught, like, if I'm using the pragmatist method to teach, the person learning from me, they will be pragmatists, but they're going to be unaware.
Yes.
Right. Correct. So they're not, They're not, because so you learned that pragmatism was a problem, and you learned what pragmatism was in the PhD program. And when you went to that Bible study, you were able to pick up on it.
Mm-hmm.
But if everyone is being taught, or not everyone, I'm being hyperbolic, but if like the majority are being taught through the pragmatic method, and that's the only way we learned, or the majority of the way that we learned, we're just gonna see this is the way that things are taught. We're not
This is
gonna
the way we
say,
teach.
yeah,
Yeah, this is how you teach.
it's not gonna be like, oh, this is the teaching method, pragmatic, but there's other teaching methods. We're just like, this is the way that I was taught, and I didn't even know there was different ways to be taught. I didn't know this was one way among many. This is what, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
And so there hasn't been any, like the PhD program I was at, the guy that was in charge, like the dean of the school, was basically saying, we need to come up with a Christian philosophy for education. We're not doing that. We're just like taking little bits and pieces from what is available to us in our culture and like utilizing it, instead of like we're downstream of philosophical culture instead of being upstream. You know, and the church should always be upstream of everything, always.
Yeah, so we're like we're on the receiving end.
Yeah,
we like caught pragmatism, and they're like, all right, now what do we do with this? Instead of putting our own philosophy out there and letting the culture do the receiving and them wrestling with it.
And what's sad is it doesn't seem to me to be that hard to answer basic philosophical questions from a Christian point of view. Like, that's not that difficult. You know, I mean, at least for me. But I mean, you know, I've been doing this for 20 years, so.
Okay, so what are the major issues with using pragmatism in Christianity?
Yeah. Okay.
Why is it a problem?
Yeah. So I'll give two main examples of where it's happening. The first one is this massive tendency in the Christian church, especially non-denominational churches, which makes up a huge percentage of like church attendees every week, because the denominations are dying. People are going to non-denominational churches. There's this gigantic push towards relevancy. Okay. And so relevancy can mean lots of things. And I think they say it for many reasons. And I think most of those reasons are pragmatic. So for me, the way I define relevancy in most of the senses of which they say it is something is relevant if it is of immediate use. So it is immediately useful for me in my daily life. Okay. You're probably not getting a whole lot of that at your Catholic church, but that is the way that Protestant churches function. Okay. It's like the way they advertise themselves. We're relevant. We give relevant messages. We teach relevancy, and like they'll have it like on the banner of their website. Relevant.
Can we pause right there? Yeah. Do they know why they're advertising themselves as relevant?
I really think I think some of them are aware, but some of them are doing it because everyone else is. Right? And that's what like the popular literature by the cool new pastor is writing, right? Like I have a book right here. The title is Making Church Relevant. That's the title of the book.
Has anyone stopped to ask like whether Christianity is inherently relevant?
Yeah, so that's the funny thing. Like that's one of the responses. It's like, yeah, of course it's relevant. Like it will never not be relevant, right? We don't have to make church relevant. It is, right? Because it's true. So it's true from, you know, obviously from our perspective, it's true.
Right.
So, you know, we don't need to make it relevant. So what they're saying, they're saying lots of different things, but one of the you have to be relevant to the culture. So therefore, like, one of the ways that you are relevant is basically you make church fun, right? We want to bring in these things from culture that are culturally relevant and make church attractional. It's called the attractional church movement. And so we want to make church a place that people want to be, make it culturally relevant. So to get people in the door. That's one of the ways that pragmatism is affecting the church. It's probably the biggest way on the biggest scale that it's like.
And it's interesting that you said that it's almost, so it's a movement, right? It's like what did you call it? The attractive movement?
The attractional church movement.
Attractional church movement. So there's an entire movement, but it seems to me that what you're saying is like these denominations are using this relevancy method just because the other parishes, it's not really that, they're not really thinking about it much. They're like, well, this is what all the other denominations are doing, and they're getting people in the door. We need to get people in the door too, so let's do this.
It's working for other people, so we're going to do it without thinking about it. Right?
Right.
Hey, it's working for them, so we're going to do it. And so, there are some people that think about it, and they don't do that. But I would say for the most part, people are not deep philosophical thinkers.
So you said there was two major ways. So number one is the attractional church method, that it's we make church relevant by, I guess, explaining how they can use it immediately in their lives.
Yeah. So backtracking just a little bit to Dewey and theory, like, because things are always changing in pragmatism, you are always focused on the here and now and the very immediate future, right? Because the future is going to change. So teach me things that are going to help me right now. So we're doing that same thing in church. And so like in pragmatic education, they don't care about history, that much, that if at all. They don't care about artistic expression. There's no well-rounded education in pragmatism. You're being taught how to do things and how to survive and how to thrive, I guess, as much as a pragmatist can thrive. So thrive in their immediate environment. And so move that forward to the church, and it's always about, in the sermons and in the Sunday schools, or lack thereof, because the Protestant churches, at least the non-denominational churches, have virtually stopped having Sunday school altogether. But it's always about, tell me something that I can use right now. Give me a tool for my toolbox. Like the phrase, here's a tool for your toolbox this week, like, has got to be said 20,000 times every Sunday in the United States. And
yes, that's interesting.
So there's no well-rounded discipleship. Like, nobody knows anything about church history. Nobody knows anything about the Bible. And I'm going to give you a perfect example in a minute. But I have found that if I hadn't gone to college and gotten a Bible theology degree, I wouldn't know anything about Christianity.
So that's man. Well, yeah. So I guess in a world where pragmatism touches everything, how are the Bills and the Dani Flows produced?
We intentionally decided to seek it out.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that
we decided that we cared about it, and we decided to investigate on our own. And we're both inquisitive people that want to learn.
And so it's the same for the people in the PhD program that presented this problem to you, right? Like they they realized it was a problem because they decided that they cared about it, and they decided they were going to ask questions, and those questions led them down to some answers, and then they thought about the answers, and the more they thought about the answers, they said, I don't like the answers. Maybe.
Can you say that last part again? Rephrase the last like 30 seconds?
Yeah, so the people that presented this problem to you in the PhD program, they also decided that they cared, and they decided to ask questions, and once they got the answers to those questions, they decided, maybe not decided, but they kind of saw these are not good answers. We don't like these answers.
Yeah, well, I think they had already seen that pragmatism was a problem. And then the people in charge were saying, like, I'm charging you as the students to tackle this problem. That's one of the things we're doing here. Like, it's not like people had to do that,
right?
But that's what, that was like the main thing that we would talk about a lot of the times.
So one of the things that you said is, like, now every sermon, and pretty much when we're talking, when Christians in Christianity are talking about Christianity and why Christianity is relevant, and why you can use Christianity immediately, in the here and now, and in the immediate future, right? They're giving you a tool for your toolbox. Like, what happens when a Christian can't produce a tool?
Exactly, because we're not teaching people to think critically and to, what if I don't have a tool? What if I don't have a hammer and I need a hammer, right? Like, I haven't been taught that yet. And also, am I going to remember that? Like, I've listened to, like, some sermons that I think are good, like, that I like, right? But I don't remember any of them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like,
I'm sure I've probably assimilated some of that, right? And, like, not specifically remembered it, but I can specifically remember going up to one of my pastors and saying, that is the best sermon I've ever heard. That was amazing. And 2 days later, I couldn't remember what it was about, because, in my opinion, sermons are not for educating. That's not the purpose of sermons.
Yeah, I've had not to get pragmatical, but I had my wife and I had a similar experience recently. I mean, right now with the pandemic and the Rona, right? You have to sign up to go to church because they've got a limit, and we've been pretty good about signing up on time and getting there. And recently, maybe 3 weeks ago, we were sitting at church, and the priest, like, melted our face off. Like, he gave a great sermon, and I didn't go up to him afterwards like you did, because they've got ushers that after church is over, they kind of direct you where you need to go, and the priest went one way and we were following it, instructions or whatever. But yeah, my wife and I talked about it, and we said, oh, that was one of the best, like, that was amazing, I can't believe that just happened. And I couldn't tell you what the sermon is about right now, but I would say that it wasn't a pragmatical sermon. Yeah,
I mean, I think sermons are to, like, encourage you and edify you. It's like the sermon doesn't have to be pragmatic for me to like, they're just not supposed to be. In my opinion, a sermon is not for educating people, no matter what method you're using, right?
So if a Christian goes to church and somehow the pastor has been able to give them a tool every time, and they've maybe unconsciously, like, have gotten used to that, the day that they don't get a tool because maybe on that particular day the pastor was just not able to muster that out of him, they're probably going to feel like cheated. Like, hey, I'm supposed to come here, you tell me something I can use, like, as soon as I walk out the door, you didn't do that, like, I'm out of here. You know what I mean? It's almost like this
You weren't relevant enough for me. You weren't useful enough for me.
Yeah, like you said this was relevant. You lied. I'm out of here. I'm going non-denominational because,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so it's like the way we do things is, well, I'll go through quickly how I think we should do things, and then
Okay.
compare it to how we're doing things.
Did you get to the second major reason? So the first one was the attractional church movement,
Okay.
and
Yeah, and the second one is this: we're only going to teach relevant things, like
Okay.
immediate useful things. So
Mhm.
we're talking about that now.
Okay. All right. Go ahead and
So
move.
I'll talk about that in general, and then like in a little bit we'll talk about specifically like in an educational Sunday school setting, how it's working. So in my opinion, what we should be doing is training people on like how to read the Bible, how to think like a Christian, not just how to act like one. Because when you get a tool in your toolbox, all you're just figuring out how to do things. You're not learning why I'm doing them. I'm not learning them I'm not learning anything on a foundational level. I'm just learning how to like build a house with my toolbox, but I don't have a foundation to put it on. So we should be cultivating critical thinkers, people that can function as a Christian without having to run to their pastor every time they run into a problem. And you do that by giving them a well-rounded education, and encouraging them to put that into practice, And so what we do instead of that is the pastor does all the hard work. Imagine if it was like eating a meal. So if I was going to teach you how to take care of yourself, not that you're not a part of the church community and that you're not going to like listen to your pastor or your friends. I'm not saying you should be a complete individualist, because that's going to be the criticism that people are going to say of what I'm about to say. But if I was going to teach you how to be a fully functional Christian, we should all want to be fully functional Christians, right? We should all be as mature as our pastor someday, right? So I'm going to teach you how to cook the meal, how to prepare it, how to put it on your plate, how to eat it, and your body's going to digest it, right? You're going to put it in your mouth, you're going to chew it, you're going to digest it, right? So, but what we do instead of that is the pastor prepares the meal, puts it on the plate for you, puts it on the dinner table, sits you down, puts the fork in your mouth, and moves your mouth up and down for you, and then hopefully your body digests it, but who knows? So that's my analogy of what's going on in general in the church, both in education and in like sermon settings. And then we wonder why. I've talked to so many pastors that like, why aren't people changing and growing? Why don't my parishioners seem to know anything? Because you're like doing all the work for them because of your pragmatic methods. But they're not aware of that. They've been taught that like, this is how we should do things, even though it's failed miserably.
Okay, so the pastors should be teaching the parishioners how to prepare their own food, how to cook it, how to put it on their plate, how to pick up the fork and put it in their mouth and chew it, and then, but the pastor's doing everything for them, and because Christians don't know how to do those things, read the Bible, interpret the Bible, whenever they come into a problem, they haven't been taught how to think about that problem as a Christian. And so they need their pastor. They need to, go to him, email him, call him, Zoom him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he's got to give him the right tool, and then, oh, okay, well, I'll see you next time I've got a problem,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
For a tool for that problem, because I don't know church history. I don't know how to read the Bible. Even if I did read it, I mean, I understand the words, but what does it mean, right? I
Mm-hmm.
don't know that. And
Mm-hmm.
so I've got to have my pastor tell me, take out those things from the Bible and present it to me as a tool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, without explaining what the Bible means.
Okay.
They're just like taking it out and then applying it and putting it on a plate for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, here's how it applies to your life, and I'm not even gonna like tell you what it really means.
Mm-hmm. I'm not going to give you like the historical context.
Yeah.
And
What
what
is?
other?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So then,
So
Yeah, go ahead.
let me do an example of method of like educational method. Let's move away from the sermon thing and talk about like Christian education in the church. And this is, I think I really got on this journey way a long time ago when I had no idea what was going on because I didn't know anything about philosophy.
Right.
So when I was a senior in college, I was a Bible and theology major, and in one of my classes, I did a research project. And when I was in college is when like I really like learned how to read the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Before I went to college, I would like pick up the Bible and I would read it, and I wouldn't really understand. I knew enough to know that I didn't know what it meant, right?
Mm-hmm.
I knew enough to know that I was a dumb 16-year-old kid who is reading the book of Romans and not knowing what's going on because I'm a dumb 16-year-old kid and I don't have any tools. I didn't have any tools with which to read it. And so then I went to college and that's when I learned how to read the Bible. So it was always frustrating to me that I didn't learn that in church.
Right.
And it seemed to me that all the churches that I would be in, they weren't doing it. Okay. So my research project my senior year was I went around to probably 10 or 12 Christian education pastors in relatively large churches in my city. And I interviewed them, and I had like a list of questions. And one of the
How old were you at the time?
I was probably, it took me a long time to get through college because I went like part-time, and so I was probably like 25.
Okay. Yeah, because I lost that it was after college, and in my mind you were like 17 interviewing pastors. I'm like, man, this guy really was inquisitive at 17 years old. Okay, sorry, continue. You're 25 and you're interviewing 10 pastors from 10 different churches.
Yeah, like so Christian education pastors that were in charge of the education program at the church. And so one of the questions I asked was, on a scale from 1 to 10, how good are people in your church at reading the Bible? 1 to 10. They all said 0 or 1, even though 0 was not an option. All of them said 0 or 1. And I asked them what they were like, if they had any plans to remedy that problem. Most of them said no. Actually, they all said no. They all said no. And then I asked them, well, why not? And all of them but 2 said, I don't know. Like they had never thought about it or something. But the 2 that did have a response both said the same thing. They said, I don't think that people would find it relevant. Okay. So in pragmatic education, it's the learner that decides what to learn, not the teacher. So in those churches, they were letting people decide. It was probably their impression of what people wanted. I don't think they were going out and surveying people, what do you want to learn about? I think they were just kind of guessing, going with the flow of the people there. But so they were allowing the learner to determine what the curriculum was going to be. And so they never taught them how to read the Bible. And that blew my mind, like, because here I am, I'm a Protestant, and, we believe way, high authority of scripture, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
we don't have that church hierarchy like the Catholics do,
Mm-hmm.
that's like equal or, of importance with the Bible. Church tradition is not as important to us. And we're not even going to teach our people how to read that document? Are you kidding me? Like, I could
Right.
not believe that was their response. And it
Mm-hmm.
just blew my mind. But I
Yeah.
didn't understand at the time why they said it. And they said it
Yeah.
because of pragmatism, right? I didn't
Mm-hmm.
understand why they said that till like 10 years later. I was like, oh, wow, that's why they said that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
But I mean, that's interesting in and of itself that it took you 10 years to figure out why they had the responses that they had. 80%
exactly.
of them said, I don't know. And, from the information that you gathered, they didn't know because they never really had thought about it. And then 20% said, I don't think it's relevant. And at the
Mm-hmm.
time, you didn't know why they were saying that until 10 years later when you're like, because it was
Mm-hmm.
pragmatism. Well,
Mm-hmm.
it is interesting. I mean, it's interesting too because, like you said, like Protestants in general, there's different denominations place a high authority on the Bible, right? And you're like, well, if it's such a high authority, why aren't we teaching our people to read it, right? And in Catholicism, we have Bible and we have tradition, and within our tradition, we have the hierarchy. Um, it says, I mean, and I understand the hierarchy, right? But I would say that in Catholicism, not everyone I mean, in Catholicism, we have the same problem. We have people that don't know how to read the
Mm-hmm.
Bible. I myself am not an expert or even an intermediate, right? Um, and then so you have people that don't understand the Bible, don't know how to read it, and then you have people that don't understand the hierarchy, and
Mm-hmm.
you have people who don't understand neither. And whose fault is that, right? I mean, if they don't understand it, hopefully it's not because they as the learner are deciding that it's not relevant. But I mean, if pragmatism has made it into everything, and um, Catholicism is part of the American culture, just like Protestantism, then it's made it into Catholicism. And, maybe our church leaders are saying, well, it's not relevant for them to understand the Bible. It's not relevant for them to understand how our hierarchy works. So, yeah, I think you're right. I think it has touched everything, unfortunately.
Go back to hopefully it's not because the learner doesn't think it's relevant.
Yeah, hopefully it's not because, I was saying that some don't understand the Bible, and maybe some understand the hierarchy, and vice versa. Maybe some don't understand the hierarchy, but they understand the Bible. And then probably the vast majority don't understand neither, right? And hopefully it's not because the learner has decided it's not relevant, and then our church leaders are deciding, well, they don't think it's relevant, so we're not going to talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
right?
You would
And
hope that the Catholic Church wouldn't be like that,
yeah,
because
but
that
like you
really
said, it's
flies in the face of, you would think would be Catholic philosophy, but who knows? Like, I
yeah,
don't know anything about the Catholic Church and how it functions on a day-to-day basis, but
right. So is there anything that we haven't said about pragmatism outside and inside Christianity?
there's plenty we could talk about, but
Right.
it's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Before we hang up, I'll just ruminate on that. We can edit the video and stuff like that. But
okay. So I guess how does like I don't want to be hyper individualistic like you said, but I mean, how does a person, I guess, escape or how does a person recognize when they're being a pragmatist, and maybe what they're being a pragmatist about is important to them? And so, like, I don't want to be a pragmatist about Catholicism, right? Because I've thought about it, and I've rethought about it, and I've
mhm,
thought about it and rethought about it again. I'm still thinking about it, and like you said,
mhm,
I've decided this is important. So I don't want to do just what works. To me, it's about the truth, and I want
yeah,
to conform myself to the truth. Uh, Maybe somebody else doesn't feel that way about Catholicism. They maybe it's something else for them. So how can we recognize when we're being pragmatist about something?
I think it is about it's continually re-examining when you come across new information. And so, like, one of the things I would say is, because we're always coming across new information, like, there is no absolute truth. But me and you would say truth is difficult to come by, right? And we're never gonna know everything perfectly. So we just always have to keep ruminating in our head the information that we come across and see, like, hey, you know, maybe I was wrong, or maybe so-and-so was right, you know? So it's just about being honest with yourself. And yeah, I mean, because it's easy for things to work. I mean, you know, you could pick any religion and make it work for you. So as long as you care about the fact that truth is coming from outside of you, you know, like, God is the author of truth, and you're trying to discover what that truth is. As long as you're always honest about that and striving for it all the time, you know, I think that's what it's all about.
That's what it's about, and that's what Christian education should be about.
Yeah, I mean, I want to go about things way differently than, like, most churches do. Like, if I'm teaching on a topic, you know, I want to give them the 4 options that, you know, these are the main 4 ways that people think about it. And I don't care which one you pick. You know, you have your own brain. I'm not going to control what you think, right? So yeah, that's how I would do things. Like, respect people's ability to think.
So so part of the problem of pragmatism is people aren't thinking, or they're thinking at a surface level. They're not
we're telling them what to think. But and we're telling them what they want to hear. So this is one of the main catchphrases. Pragmatists in the church, we are meeting people where they're at, and we're giving them what they want.
Oh my goodness, meeting people where they're at, dude. That's all over Catholicism.
Oh really?
Oh my goodness, it's like,
okay,
like,
so we can go ahead. Okay, that's just my description of it. So so what I want to do is, I want to meet people where they're at and give them what they need, not what they want, right? And I might do that in such a way that, you know, like, I don't want to, like, challenge people to this, like, ridiculous, you know, amount where it turns them off and they don't want to talk to me. I'm not going to be, like, super. That's just not wise rhetorically to, like, beat someone down on everything right away. You have to, like, it takes a long time for people to change and grow and to change, like, thought paradigms and stuff like that. So like, there's going to always be some amount of, like, giving people a little bit of what they want. you gotta let people win sometimes, or they will disengage. But yeah, that's a difference.
Yeah, so what I was gonna say, yeah, that's interesting. So you're saying, like, yeah, meet people where they're at, but, you know, kind of analyze and see what they need and give them a little bit of what they need, not just give them what they want, and then every time they come back, keep giving them what they want to hear, the tool that they need or whatever. Yeah, so I mean, I don't like to think of Christianity this way, but I mean, you know how, like, on the internet and on TV, there's different, like, subcultures and, like, niches, right? Like, there's and even, like, in politics, right? Like all over the internet, you have like liberal politics influencers, and they are kind of the spokesman for that kind of political philosophy. Same with, like, conservatives. Like, you have a guy with a show, and he comes out and he tells you what he thinks, and then pretty much all of the audience kind of, like, agrees. Well, I don't like to think of
chamber.
Right. I don't like to think of Christianity that way, but unfortunately, because of the internet, it's very similar. Like within Catholicism, you have, like more conservative voices in Catholicism that have like their own show, and they come out and tell you what they think, and their base is all like, yeah. And then you have
Mhm.
more Catholic people online that are on the liberal side theologically or what have you, and they come out and they say what they think, and all of their people are like, yeah. So I would say that on the more, for lack of better terminology, like we talk about Christianity like politically, because politics is like pragmatism in the United States, right? Politics like touches everything, just like pragmatism touches everything. So within Christianity, we're like, oh, he's a conservative Christian. Oh, he's like a liberal Christian, when like those are
Mhm.
political terms, right?
Kind of.
Yeah. So like in Catholicism, the more liberal side of Catholicism, they use that phrase all the time. Like, you have to meet people where they're at. You have to meet people where they're at. You have to meet people. I don't know what they say after that, but that's all over. That's the
Yeah.
thing, to meet people where they're at. Meet people where they're at.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
sounds to
So
me like it's a little bit pragmatist.
yeah, definitely. It's pragmatist and postmodern.
Mm.
So like a far a left liberal church, whether they're Catholic or Protestant, is basically that mix of pragmatism and postmodernism.
Mm.
Where like the fundamentalist churches are a mix of modernism and pragmatism. So yeah, when they say meet people where they're at, when a liberal says that, they mean meet people where they're at and acquiesce yourself to their worldview. Like, you
Mm.
need to validate them.
I mean, I don't know as much as you, but that sounds accurate to me. That sounds exactly like what's happening on the liberal side of
Mhm.
Catholicism.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because there's no absolute truth.
Hmm.
Um, and we want them to be part of the crew. Bring
Hmm.
them in, and we'll let them think whatever they want. It's fine. And we kind of think whatever we want too. So
Hmm. Okay, so then, well, so what would the modernist pragmatist do after they meet a person where they're at? What would be the difference there?
like in a conservative church, that's operating pragmatically,
Hmm.
they meet them where they're at, and then they give them what they want by giving them relevant messages and by making church fun.
Mm. Okay, so I
Right?
see why
That's
it's a
what
problem. Yeah.
they're going to church to listen to cool music
Hmm.
and to hear an entertaining sermon by a guy that's funny and cool and somebody that I would want to hang out with on Friday night,
And have a
um,
beer.
and have a beer, and and hopefully they also want to like meet people, which is a healthy thing.
Mm, yeah.
But so, but yeah, church needs to be someplace I want to roll out of bed on Sunday and go to,
Hmm.
because it's fun. That's how the more conservative pragmatist churches would operate.
As opposed, so like, let me tell you, so me, I don't always have fun at church, but that's not why I go to church.
Hmm.
I go to church so that I'm more likely to stay in the faith,
Hmm.
because I want to die in the faith. That's what I
Hmm.
want. That's what I want to do. I want to live and I want to die in the faith.
Yeah.
And I don't think I could do that without. I don't think I could do that without church.
Hmm.
So, what would the proper, as uh, the so the in Christian education, what would be the, I guess, proper reason that Christians should want to go to church?
There's a lot of reasons.
Hmm.
Like, the real reasons we should go to church is that one for sure. You
Hmm.
know, we're always better off being around other Christians,
Hmm.
developing a real community with people. that share the same values as us, and to just kind of live life together.
Yeah.
That's the main reason, in my
Mhm.
opinion.
Yeah.
And you know, I think part of the reason that I've naturally gone down the route that I have is because probably the weirdest thing about me is I'm not a musical person. Like, I don't care about music at all. Like,
That's very interesting.
yeah, there's music that I like. Like,
Mhm.
there's plenty. I grew up in the 80s. There's plenty of 80s music that I like. Like, when I
Mhm.
listen to it, I enjoy it, right? But I don't care about it. Like,
Mhm.
if I never listened to another song again, I would not care. I know that
Mhm.
sounds crazy, but I wouldn't care.
Well,
And
I
so
mean,
when I go to church and I listen to like the cool music, I don't care. It doesn't do anything for me,
right.
right? Now, on the other hand, even though I say that, like, hymns, it's a preference or whatever. Hymns will make me, I have weeped from hymns,
Mm.
right? Like,
Mhm.
they do something to me spiritually. But I have never wanted to go to church because I like the music.
Mhm.
And that's just because I don't care about music, right?
Mhm.
So, but for me, like, most people in today's culture are drawn to church because of the music.
Mhm. I
So
mean,
I think that's one reason that I've caught on to this whole thing of
yeah,
trying to
yeah,
make
yeah.
church cool,
They
because
didn't
it
take
doesn't affect, it just bounces right off of me. Like, I don't care about the music.
they didn't take Bill into account when they were coming up with pragmatism.
Yeah.
Well, like, at least not pragmatism in Christianity, right? Like
Yeah.
they were like everybody loves music, and they weren't thinking about Bill, who does not care about music. Well, I mean, everybody, not to get off like track, but I mean, everyone has like things like that. Like most, you know, like the stereotype about guys is that we all love sports and that we like talk about sports. I do not care about sports.
Hmm.
I do think it's because, in my opinion, I think it's because I grew up without a father and a father figure. Like, I feel like that's something that, like, your dad maybe passes on his favorite sport, or maybe he
Hmm.
recognizes that you like a sport, and for like father son bond time, like he'll get into that sport kind of or whatever. And I just don't. I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
understand when people, but I mean, like, I could talk about philosophy and Christianity for like hours. I mean, we've been talking about pragmatic philosophy for like an hour and a half, and
Hmm.
some people don't get that, right? Like, they're like,
Yeah.
yeah, how could you talk about that stuff for like, and
It's
there's people
like,
that
who
can talk about
cares?
music for hours or sports for
Yeah.
hours. So,
Yeah.
all right,
Well, it's probably
Bill,
because they wouldn't find philosophy useful.
that's right. They're being pragmatic about philosophy. Like, I'm never gonna use that ever. That's hilarious because that's the joke about philosophy, right? Like, when people would say like, "Well, what are you studying?" Like, I'm studying philosophy. Well, how are you gonna get a job, right? It's
Yeah,
not
yeah, yeah.
useful to get a job, therefore, don't waste your time
Yep.
like studying
That
it.
that is pragmatism right there. Like, that is the, you got to get a degree in something useful.
Next time someone says that, I mean, people don't often say that to me, but if someone ever says that to me, I'm going to say, well, you're being a pragmatist. And if they don't know what it means, I'll be like, I thought you said philosophy wasn't useful. You don't even know what a pragmatist is, right? All
Yeah,
right,
that's
Bill,
funny.
any final thoughts on pragmatism?
I think we covered a lot of the basics,
Yeah,
so
well, to
I'm
me,
happy with that.
I'm happy too. And to me, this was very interesting. I'm glad that we did this, and I mean, I'm glad that we talked about this. The one, I mean, it had to been within the first 2, 3 times that we ever had um, a conversation, and I genuinely have been thinking about this since then. And for people who don't know, I mean, at the beginning, I said that we were friends and that we met in class, but I mean, we even talked about this when I went over and had dinner at your house. So
Hmm.
I'm glad that I put a little bit of more, for lack of better terminology, put a little bit more meat on the bones on pragmatist philosophy. So thank you so much for your time.
No problem. It was super fun to talk to you. So hopefully we can talk about something else someday.
Definitely. Yep, for sure.
All
All right, man. Take care and have a good night.
right. Have a good Christmas.
Merry Christmas. All right, my guys and my girls, aka my dear and beloved Dani Flo. I hope that you enjoyed that conversation with Bill on pragmatism, both inside and outside of Christianity. If you did enjoy that conversation, that very philosophical conversation on the Dani Flo podcast, we talk philosophy of life, which is what is significant. I share what is significant in my life. I study philosophy part time. If I'm studying it, it's significant. It makes my life significant. As Fulton Sheen said, it makes my life worth living. If you're interested in not studying philosophy part time like Dani Flo, but just learning a little bit more about philosophy. What is it? What it's used for? Right. Keep watching the Dani Flo podcast. Subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Subscribe here on YouTube. Hit the bell for notifications. Leave a comment. Were you familiar with pragmatism before this episode? What are your thoughts on pragmatism? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Um, as Bill explained, in pragmatism, truth is relative and it's useful. So if it's not relative and it's not if it's not useful, it's not true. What do you think about that? Leave a comment. More importantly than subscribing, it's very important to subscribe. Please subscribe. But just as important as subscribing, please share this video with everyone that you know so that you can help grow the Dani Flo podcast video party, help grow the Dani Flo podcast YouTube party, right? We want as many people to join our party as possible. So please share this with everyone that you know, your bestie and your fam bam. And while you're doing that, just remember what Venerable Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen taught us. Your life is worth living. Love you, my guys and my girls. Bye.